Good evening. Angela Pearman with the late news. George Speight and 12 key associates behind Fiji's coup have appeared in court. They were charged with weapons offences and unlawful assembly, but prosecutors claimed the immunity granted to the rebels by the military was invalid. That leaves the way open for more serious charges of sedition and treason.
Troops just back from Timor were deployed in strength to seal off the court complex. Police and military escorted the riot bus carrying the accused. Elisoni Lingeri, the military mastermind of the coup, claims to have been bashed. So too does the coup frontman, George Speight, looking less confident than normal. George's brother Jim is an Australian citizen, but his passport has been revoked by Canberra. The 13 men all pleaded not guilty to all charges. Potentially the most important may be that which accuses them of unlawful assembly at the Parliament between May 19 and the 18th of July. The dates are critical because the Speight group had previously been confident they wouldn't be prosecuted for deposing the coalition government and taking hostages. The prosecution argues that the immunity guarantee should be regarded by the court as null and void. Firstly, because it was conditional on the Speight group returning all of the weapons that had been stolen from the military. Secondly, because it's now alleged that the military commander only signed the immunity deal under duress. If that argument prevails, the prosecution will have stronger grounds to pursue charges of treason and sedition against the coup plotters, charges foreshadowed today. But the Speight defence team was effective, accusing the military of brutality. The chief magistrate was so concerned he seriously considered granting them bail to prevent further maltreatment. For now, though, Speight and his colleagues are being shipped back to Nuku'lau.
How's the island? Excellent, you know, like every island in Fiji.
George Speight cast himself as a nationalist hero. Some Fijians still agree. Speight's next chance to escape his island prison will be at a bail hearing in 6 days' time. Greg Wilesmith, ABC News, Suva.
The man George Speight overthrew in Fiji, former Prime Minister Mahendra Chaudhry, was meeting opposition leader Kim Beazley in Sydney. Mr Beazley assured Mr Chaudhry the ALP would continue to support sanctions against Fiji. The opposition leader says while he's happy with the actions taken so far by the Australian government, international pressure needs to be maintained. The Australian government may ban Japanese fishing boats from our ports if no agreement can be reached over the fishing of southern bluefin tuna. Australia and New Zealand had taken the matter to an international tribunal, but it has ruled that it cannot intervene to enforce Australia's quota. Bluefin tuna fishing is worth more than $500 million a year to Australia, and the industry says the failure to stop Japanese fishing is a disaster. But the federal government says it's in Japan's best interest to compromise.
The Japanese require access to Australian ports, to New Zealand ports. We obviously are not obliged to give them that access.
Australia is the only country trying to regulate bluefin tuna fishing. French air accident experts investigating last week's Concord disaster say they have found a 40-centimetre strip of metal among runway debris. They say it doesn't come from the aircraft, arousing speculation that the metal may have caused the initial tyre blowout on takeoff.
Air France's Concord fleet may soon be flying again. Grounded since last week's disaster, there's fresh evidence tonight that the tragedy wasn't caused by a structural fault with the plane. The Concorde appears to have been a victim of circumstance. The runways at Paris's main airports are checked regularly by mobile patrols, but it looks as though the Concorde ran into a piece of metal lying on the tarmac. The crash investigators have found the metal amongst debris on the runway. It seems to have burst one of the plane's tyres. The supersonic jet was seen veering to the left just before takeoff. The runway had been inspected a few hours before, part of a daily routine. But it wasn't enough. As the last few pieces of wreckage are removed from the crash site, the sequence of events which brought the plane down is now much clearer. When the tyre was punctured, pieces of the wheel or undercarriage spun off, piercing the fuel tank and causing an uncontrollable fire. The piece of metal found on the runway was just 40 centimetres long, but investigators believe it still set off a catastrophic chain of events. In future, any airport used by Concorde will have to conduct much more rigorous checks before every takeoff or landing.
A man has been found alive after stowing away in the wheel housing of a jumbo jet from Tahiti to Los Angeles. The Air France jet had flown at 38,000 feet for about 10 hours. Experts believe the temperature fell to 50 below zero. After being discovered barely conscious by mechanics, the man was rushed to hospital where doctors began to gradually warm him. An American urologist has launched an $800 million lawsuit against a series of mobile phone makers and suppliers. Dr. Christopher Newman alleges that frequent phone usage has caused a tumour in his brain. His condition has been diagnosed as terminal. His lawyer says the case is very different from previous ones that have failed.
The type of tumour, the location of the tumour, the documentation, the fact that his own physician will testify that his tumour is due to the cellular phone.
Last week, the Australian Consumers Association said that although there was no scientific evidence that mobile phones were a health hazard, it recommended the use of a hands-free kit to reduce microwave radiation reaching the brain. The battle for control of iron ore miner North Limited looks over. South African-based group Anglo American says it won't try to top yesterday's bid from rival Rio Tinto. By getting control of North Limited, Rio Tinto will become the world's second biggest iron ore producer. Rugby and the Wallabies have retained the Bledisloe Cup thanks to a last-minute penalty goal by captain John Eales. After a slow start, New Zealand took what looked like a winning lead until Eales kept the Tri-Nations series alive.
Australia and New Zealand have left the rest of the world behind in their execution of modern rugby, leaving the All Blacks and the Wallabies to exhibit the way the game should be played.
More drops! He's there!
This time it was the Wallabies who got away to a flyer as they took an early 12-0 lead.
Here's another one for Ross!
Which was wiped out by the All Blacks in the space of a few minutes.
Here goes Cullen, thank you!
The try that earned New Zealand the edge, the result of intricate pre-planning and precise execution.
Clever variation. Cullen again! Number 2! What a superb try!
While Sterling Mortlock became the fastest Australian to reach 100 test points, and Andrew Merton surpassed Grant Fox as the All Blacks' all-time leading scorer.
A moment in history for Andrew Merton.
Individual milestones were largely irrelevant. Jonah Lomu's hit on Ben Tune illustrated the defensive intensity of the second half as the tries dried up and penalty goals decided the cup. But just when New Zealand prepared to celebrate, the All Blacks conceded a penalty. With Mortlock off the field, the captain who leads by example took it upon himself to save the Wallabies.
Has done it! The Wallabies have the Bledisloe Cup in dramatic circumstances.
Look, what a series. I mean, what is it, 1 point in this game? There was 4 points in the first one and 2 very special games.
Eales' teammates call him nobody because nobody's perfect. On this performance, who could argue? The Bledisloe Cup retained, the world champions are now aiming for their first Tri-Nations trophy.
The Olympic torch was in Tasmania today, but at its final destination, preparations are taking place for its arrival. A brief practice burn in the Olympic cauldron at Homebush took place last night. The lighting of the flame in Stadium Australia will be the climax of the opening ceremony in a little over a month's time. And before we go, a look at the weather around Australia for tomorrow. A few showers for Sydney, Brisbane and Perth, sunny and humid in Darwin, and a fine sunny day for Hobart, Melbourne, Adelaide and Canberra. And that's all from the National Newsroom this evening. Good night.